to both work on both sides of the Capitol. So now I think we're going to walk across the Capitol and get to the Senate side and the Senate kind of portion of our panel. And I want to introduce the chairwoman from Wyoming, Senator Cynthia Lummis. This is her second round as chairing the Western Caucus. She first took on the House, and now she's here at the Senate, so she'll give some remarks, and then we'll have our panel.
Thank you. Thanks, Darren. And by all means, get up, grab a cup of coffee or tea or whatever you want, and get comfortable. Welcome. I'm delighted to be chairing the Senate Western Caucus and to welcome you all to Las Vegas for our annual event here, which is a helpful venue for us to gather and discuss Western issues. It's also really helpful for us as senators and House members to meet with each other and touch base about what we are doing that crosses the Capitol building. So the big issue, I will say, has been permitting reform. It's affecting everybody. It's affecting every business. It's affecting both parties. It's affecting our all-of-the-above energy strategy. Even people who are completely wedded to solar and wind to the exclusion of everything else are finding that permitting reform is what's preventing them, the absence of permitting reform is preventing them from being able to even build solar and wind projects. So finally, they're waking up to the problems that they themselves created, and they created them to prevent the development of energy from fossil fuel sources, and now it's coming back to bite them. So within our agenda is to reform permitting and get moving on some of these projects. If we have to take 20 years to get a permit to mine rare earth minerals, we're going to be dependent on foreign sources for another 20 years. We can't afford to do that. You look at where we're getting cobalt, copper, manganese, and other rare earth minerals that are necessary for electric vehicles. And we've got to start producing those in the U.S. We're dependent on China for no good reason. Permitting is huge. The Endangered Species Act is another issue where we're trying to make progress. Dan Newhouse and I have co-sponsored legislation on our respective sides of the building to stop the Biden administration from repealing Trump-era reforms to the regulatory mechanisms in the Endangered Species Act that once again slow down the ability to develop energy production and rare earth mining in the United States. And I want to thank Dan Newhouse for his great partnership, as well as the House Western Caucus, which I also had the privilege of sharing when I served in the House. So I have great respect for the work of the House Western Caucus and thoroughly enjoy my relationships that remain there. You all in the House, by the way, I want to compliment you on the breadth of participation in the Western Caucus in the House. I understand that you have expanded well beyond those states west of the Mississippi, a number of whom are here today, and are dealing with the same attacks on our ability to farm, to produce energy, to produce livestock, and the other assaults with this Green New Deal notion of carbon capture, when we can actually do it by sequestering carbon. We can sequester it out of the air. We can turn coal into asphalt. It's called cofalt. And we can make bricks out of coal. We can pave roads out of coal. So people who say that the only use of coal is to leave it in the ground are completely wrong. And of course, it's because of ingenuity. It's because of private business. And in some cases working with Western universities to deal pragmatically with these changes. But without permitting reform, none of this can happen. You know, I frequently fly on United Airlines, and they proudly come on with a little blurb at the beginning of a flight that says their goal is to become carbon neutral by 2050. And that requires them to have a different fuel mix. You can't have a different fuel mix unless we reform permitting. And so they too are going to encounter some of the same things that the business sector in the West here represented, as well as the people who represent you in Congress, are encountering. So with that, I want to tell you the Senate Western Caucus has had some great events this year. One of them was in Yosemite National Park, which was on my bucket list of places to see. The House was there as well. We were there dealing with fire policy at a time when Lahaina had just burned to the ground, so it was very relevant. And the conversations were very serious because we saw that even in Hawaii, the consequences of inadequate fire policy was devastating to what we think of as a tropical location. And of course, our western forests that we could responsibly manage through conservation logging are instead going up in flames, literally. And there's no reason that should be happening, because that too is puts carbon in the air when we could be turning it into an economically productive product that meets American needs and has American jobs attached to it. So RFD TV was there. I see Christina in the back. I want to thank RFD TV. They're a true friend of the House and Senate Western Caucus. The broadcasting of events that highlight Western issues is important to us, and we've never had that kind of reach before because our caucus didn't have that kind of profile before. So RFD TV, the Cowboy Channel, and others have been enormously helpful to us. Christina, I want to give you a shout out. You want to stand up so we can applaud you? And we thank you all. Between the businesses that are hiring people and participating in our economy in the West, we want to work in partnership with you to solve these problems so we can have a vibrant West, so we can have the water, the clean air, the beautiful landscapes that we know we can have while still being good stewards of the land, the air, the water, and the tremendous resources that God has blessed us with. So with that said, that is my report on the Senate Western Caucus. With one exception, we're doing something kind of different and fun in Washington, D.C. After the turn of the new year. Not only are we focusing on our usual concerns about natural resources, the Endangered Species Act, permitting, energy, we're doing an event to focus on the arts as they are portrayed in Western states. We're doing it at the beautiful Library of Congress. We will have Western art on display as well as Western memorabilia that is owned by the United States Library of Congress. So if you're going to be in Washington in January and February, keep an eye on your schedule and join us at the Library of Congress. In my opinion, it's the most beautiful building in Washington. I absolutely love it. I want to invite my dear Senate colleague, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, to join me now. Cindy Hyde-Smith was the Commissioner of Agriculture in Mississippi, and we are blessed to have her as a member of the United States Senate. Fun story again, on January 6th, we'd had a long day followed by a long night, and January 6th concluded in the wee hours of the morning after we finished voting and we're leaving. Well, this was my first week in the U.S. Senate. First week in the U.S. Senate, January 6th. So I had a temporary office, and all of our staffers had much earlier in the day been ordered to go home, to get out of harm's way. I went back to my office. My office door was locked. My purse, my keys, my hotel room key, at that point I just had a hotel, all in there. I thought, gosh darn it, I'm going to have to sleep on this hard floor in the hall of the Dirksen building. And Cindy Hyde-Smith called. First week I'd ever met her. She said, hey, do you need a ride back to your hotel? It was a little dicey in D.C. that day, to put it mildly. And I said, I can't go to the hotel because I don't have a key. It's the middle of the night. This is crazy. She said, oh, that was my temporary office when I first got here. I'll be right there. And within 5 minutes, she and her staffer had jimmied the door lock and broke in. Sorry. They broke into the office. I got my room key. They took me to my hotel, and all ended well. This is a very resourceful woman. Nothing is daunting to her. Her husband, Mike, is here, and he will attest to that. There's nothing she cowers from. She is an absolute, resolute advocate for the very issues we care about. Thank goodness she's on the U.S. Senate Agriculture Committee, and I'm proud to call her my friend. She's going to join me in being co-monitor of this next panel on rodeo and the importance of rodeo to the American West. Please welcome U.S. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith from the great state of Mississippi. Come on up. Do you want to go first? Are our panelists here? Yeah. Yahoo! Okay. Please come join us. Am I introducing the panelists?
You can.
Okay.
You're Senator Lummis.
Well, I'm a proud friend of Cindy Hyde-Smith, and a proud friend of the folks that are going to join us today. I'm so grateful for your participation. It's fun to be doing a panel on rodeo, especially for me. I was born and raised in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I am the great-granddaughter of one of the founders of Cheyenne Frontier Days. He was the first treasurer of the Cheyenne Frontier Days Committee in 1897. I was the first woman on the board of directors of Cheyenne Frontier Days a lot of years later. I got to be Miss Frontier. I was crowned Miss Frontier by Roy Rogers, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. It just runs in the veins of my family. And so this panel's great. I'm excited to talk about the economics of rodeo. And I'm going to start by saying this. You know, over Thanksgiving, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal by Peggy Noonan, and the article was like, this Thanksgiving, be thankful for Taylor Swift. I'm going, what? So I read the article, and of course, we all know Taylor Swift's getting a lot of attention these days. She's got a wildly successful tour. She's a billionaire. She's the Time Magazine Person of the Year. And she is a frequent visitor of the Kansas City Chiefs game. Those poor kids, her relationship with Travis Kelce's all over the news. And I thought, why in the world is Peggy Noonan thankful on Thanksgiving for Taylor Swift, especially with all the turmoil in the world? I read the article, and then I came to the conclusion she was absolutely right. The economics of her tour are phenomenal. For example, she was in Los Angeles for a couple days, and it had $320 million in economic impact on Los Angeles in just those 2 days, thousands of jobs. Well, guess what? This rodeo, the National Finals Rodeo, has the equivalent economic impact on Las Vegas. It takes us 10 days, which she can do in 2, but $318 million economic impact of this rodeo in this town. Cheyenne Frontier Days, the world's largest outdoor rodeo in my little town, has a $100 million economic impact on Cheyenne. Salinas, California, we've got a state that's trying to outlaw rodeo. It's like an $18 million impact on Salinas. I used to work for Cotton Rosser, Flying U Rodeo Company in Marysville, California, did rodeos all over the western United States when I graduated from college. I know the economic impact of rodeo on this country. Imagine Houston, Fort Worth, Calgary. If you've never been to the Pendleton Rodeo, it is unique among the rodeos. I mean, this business, this profession, this sport, this extreme sport, and this culture, maybe most important, this culture is extremely important to the West, to our way of life, and even across and east of the Mississippi River. So I really want to thank this distinguished panel for being here today. First of all, Tom Glaus, PRCA CEO. Tom Glaus was named the CEO of the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association in 2021. He was previously the PRCA COO and Director of Rodeo Administration. He is a long-time Wyoming guy, served as the Wyoming State Insurance Commissioner, former rodeo contestant, former president of the Mountain State Circuit for 6 years. We are so proud of, Wyoming is so proud of Tom Glaus and the expertise and professionalism that he has brought to the PRCA. Please welcome Tom Glaus. Scott Dorenkamp, and Scott, I want to have some conversations with you when this panel's over on another matter. Scott is the Livestock Program and Government Relations Manager at the PRCA since 2019. In this role, he tracks animal welfare statistics, animal welfare compliance, and government regulation. He also serves on the American Horse Council and the Colorado Horse Development Authority. Having worked for a rodeo stock contractor, I know the care that goes into the rough stock and the roping livestock that are taken down the road, and Scott guarantees that not only happens, but that is communicated, given the onslaught of groups like HSUS on our precious rodeo lifestyle. So Scott, welcome so much to our group. And Patrick, thank you. I know I gave all of the kudos to Miss Christina, but we know that you're behind the scenes of great on-air talent like you've recruited in Christina and others. Patrick Gotch is the founder of Rural Free Delivery Television, RFD-TV. After working in communications and livestock, Patrick dedicated himself to RFD-TV, which provides coverage of Western issues and Western events. Patrick lives in his hometown of Elkhorn, Nebraska, with his wife and 3 daughters. We are so grateful that you would be here. I am going to turn the agenda over to Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith to continue to monitor our event, and welcome one and all.
Thank you very much, and I truly appreciate everybody that's a member here and your efforts, because we sit under that dome. We sit in the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives, but we couldn't do it without you. And when I tell you this is such a critical matter now, I cannot stress that enough. We know the fire, the attack that we're under. Thank God I have people like Senator Cynthia Lummis that can come, that's worked for a rodeo stock company. I mean, this lady knows it in and out. We have to be your defenders. That's what we end up being, is your defenders. And it's getting harder every day. I'm just going to be honest with you. You all have a TV in your house. You all know how crazy things can get so very quickly. But when it comes to animal rights, people can be so well-meaning and implement some of the most harmful things to our way of life without even knowing it. I coined a term earlier, so many people are pushing poodles. You know, they want to protect the animals. They want to go to the extreme to make sure these small animals are taken care of without realizing the implication that it has on livestock. So we have to be the ones there of reason. And these people are so dramatic. I mean, they come in and they have a lot of money behind them. They have a lot of resources that can put many microphones in front of them. It's our job to educate, to make them understand what is actually going on. So many people, Cynthia's definitely not one of them, but so many people are intimidated to take on this subject. They think, oh gosh, my constituents are going to get mad at me because they think that I'm letting these animals get harmed, which is so far from the truth. We know the men and women that pull those trailers up and down the highways of our country, participating in rodeo events, they didn't just decide that they were going to start rodeoing. They've done this their whole life. They know how to take care of animals. They know what humane treatment means. My gosh, we have so much money tied up in this. We're cattle producers in South Mississippi. We run a livestock auction, have had an auction every Tuesday since 1942. I think I can step in and be the one that can voice our concerns of what is cruelty, what is handling livestock, in the way that I can feed you every single day. You have to deal, 2% of us, as you well know, feed the other 98% of the people in this country. And you have to be diplomatic, you have to go in, but be the defender that it takes to let them know this is what is really happening, this is what this trailer does, this is what this piece of equipment does. No one is harming these animals here because it is so far-reaching. When President Biden now signs a bill into law, it is so far-reaching. And to undo any of that is such a task. Our job is to never let it get there. Our job is to make sure we're the defender that you need. I had the opportunity to introduce a resolution. I call it my Gotch resolution. That, all it says is we need more rural information on networks and the airwaves. That's all it says. It is promoting things like what would we do without RFD-TV and the Cowboy Channel. But the rest of the world doesn't see it like that. And they want to battle that. They want to make sure this man cannot even do what he does that is so important to educate the rest of America. We got a resolution introduced. Got really good traction on it that I got to update you on it. But we hotlined it this past week, and we had one little hiccup. And, buddy, I got in that member's face really fast and said, I don't know what your issues are, but I'm here to answer them. We're going to get this done. And you hate to be just that force, the one that, when I walk in the door, they think, she means business. But you have to be that defender. You have to be the one that jumps in the arena with that confidence of, yeah, bring it on, because I can answer your questions. I am a former ag commissioner. I ran the Dixie National Livestock Rodeo and Livestock Show as ag commissioner before I came to the U.S. Senate. We have worked with so many contractors, PRCA. I cannot tell you how professional that is. I'm preaching to the choir, but to preach to those who want to take a shot at us. That's what you have to do. And so many times, I think, let these other folks help us fight the battle. You are those other folks that help us fight this battle. It's such an honor to be there. It is such an honor to serve on the Ag Committee. But when you look around the room, Cory Booker is on the Ag Committee. He's a vegetarian. Tell me how a vegetarian got on the Ag Committee. And then you look over there, Fetterman is on the Ag Committee. We're not sure what he is yet. But, even in our circle on the Ag Committee, it is such a challenge so many times. So I just want you to know that we're there fighting the fight for you. We're there to protect these guys. So those far-reaching things that get the signature of the president don't appear in front of the president. And I'm just grateful, but I need reinforcements. And when I say that, we don't need to look at just what's happening in individual states. Mitt Romney's retiring. We have Joe Manchin retiring. We've got to replace these people throughout the country with people who think like we think, who are willing to stay with the facts, to stay with the science, and not some wild idea a well-financed group comes in and convinces a lot of members that this is a good idea. We have to elect people throughout this country that can help us defend this. So don't just go look inside your own boundaries. Please look outside of that. We all are members of national associations, organizations. We can reach out to those who may not be aware of who's running in their state and say, we need to get to find that person. We've got to think much broader. I live in the South. You know, we're God's guns and kids. You know, we're safe down there. But outside the South, in Pennsylvania, that we lost a Republican there, that was replaced by a guy that Monday night in the White House had on a pair of shorts and a hoodie. Yep. We have got to step up, send reinforcements to us, be so conscious of the things throughout the country, because there's only 100 senators, guys. There's only 100. We have to make sure that we can elect people that can fight the fight with us. And so I'm going to ask you to think outside of that. Send me reinforcements. Send Senator Lummis and I reinforcements that when we look at states that have someone that is not friendly to our way of life, we make sure we do everything we can to get them defeated. And I travel the country campaigning. I will continue to do that. But this guy is so valuable in helping us get the messages out that we need out, because it is critical. I am proud to be here. I've done way too much talking. I'm going to be quiet.
Now I'd like to ask Tom Glaus, would you visit with us a little bit about the economic impact PRC events have on communities, big ones, small ones, U.S., Canada, Mexico? Tell us a little bit about your perch at the PRCA.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I have got to visit with some of you in Senate subcommittees when I was insurance commissioner, but thank you, Cynthia, for leading this group. We're very proud of our senators in Wyoming, and we're well represented, and we appreciate the representation we get to protect our way of life. And it is truly a way of life for us, and it is under attack right now. We cannot accumulate the entire economic impact that we have in the rodeo world. The PRCA alone sanctions over 790 events across the United States and Canada. Now, each of those events has multiple performances. There's 20 performances in Houston, there's 10 in Cheyenne, 10 in Calgary, and so total we have about 2,400 performances at those 790 events. We are the only sporting association that's seen growth and prospered during COVID. We used to historically be around 500 events. During COVID, we always thought it would be a grassroots recovery. People were comfortable coming to small rodeos with their family and friends, and as they got comfortable that nobody or very few people would die or get sick, they started going to regional events, and then our rodeos in our metro areas slowly came back. But imagine the impact. This rodeo alone in Las Vegas is over $300 million impact. Compared to the Super Bowl, Super Bowl's about $600 million impact to the city of Las Vegas that will happen in February. The impact that rodeo brings to our country is monumental. $100 million in Cheyenne. But all of the little communities, think about how many communities that their annual celebration is really the one biggest resource for that community, that county, that regional area. And it's all across the country. We're very proud that some of our smallest committees host some of our biggest rodeos. St. Paul, Oregon, 450 people just outside Portland, has the biggest 4th of July rodeo in the country. Thousands and thousands of people attend that rodeo. Pendleton, Oregon, as Cynthia mentioned, is a sleepy town of 15,000 people. And if you've never been to Pendleton during the roundup, that town is consumed by people from all walks of life that want to see the rodeo, want to experience our way of life. For 2 days or 3 days that they're at that rodeo, they want to be cowboys. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to protect that way of life. And not only does it protect our way of life, but it provides the economic incentive for many, many communities to thrive. When during COVID and other similar events, most economies tanked, but we survived. I gotta brag on the guy sitting next to me. How many of you ever knew that the PRCA put on a presidential command performance for Ronald Reagan, President Reagan? 1983, Scott was, how old were you, 10?
I was a freshman.
Freshman. So Scott's the only person in this room that I'm aware of that was actually in Landover, Maryland. Got to be a part of the presidential command performance. If you do get a chance, we do have an old video of the rodeo. President Reagan invited all the competitors to the White House afterwards, presented buckles to the champions from that rodeo. So we have had a large presence in the past, and I am thankful that you're carrying the torch here for us today.
Scott, thanks for being here. Hey, we're interested in what you're doing because you're on the front line of sort of responding to some of these extremist groups that are taking after this sport. Would you talk about how you're educating people about animal health and animal care within the rodeo business?
Sure. I think we need to start out with how the misconceptions, and when you say extremist groups, that really doesn't do justice to the people who are showing up and protesting. And I never really realized it till I actually went to California and attended a County Board of Supervisors meeting in Alameda County and then went to LA a couple times. You really don't know what you're dealing with till you see these people in person. TV does not do them justice. They literally think that having a seeing eye dog, a blind person having a seeing eye dog, is horrible, that you should just wander around and trip over things rather than have a service animal. They are very extreme. No meat, no leather. They equate, when you get down to it, they equate your dog, your horse, whatever it may be, to you. Make no mistake. There is no difference between you and them. And that is not how I see things. But as far as the welfare goes, you can't find people who take better care of horses, bulls, cattle. It costs too much. Just this last year, Coriani cattle, which we require as an association to be the animals for the steer wrestling, I was speaking with a friend of mine. It cost him $1,100 per steer to get them to his house before he ever got to use them. So the idea that we would abuse them is ridiculous to start out with. It's economically not feasible. As far as our rodeos go, we now have, and we've had them for years, registries, buck and horse registries, buck and bull registries. The other day, it would have been Wednesday morning, at the bull sale at the South Point, somebody paid $60,000 for a bull, an unproven bull. Later that same morning, they paid $38,000 for a bucking horse. Again, unproven. These are prospects. It is not cheap. We deal with this kind of stuff all the time. The thing in LA, we've fought for 4 years. Tuesday morning, the city council was scheduled to vote. They kicked the can down the road, mainly because 100 charros showed up on Main Street on their horses. They probably hadn't had horses on Main Street in Los Angeles in front of City Hall since it was built. But they had to start all back over. It has to go to the attorney. It has to come back to committee. And it's always enjoyable to see, no offense to Tom, but it's always enjoyable to see two attorneys bicker with one another in front of God and everybody. So it was fun. One of the committee members who is going to hear this basically told the other committee member in not very nice terms where he could put his opinions. So it was good watching, but it's something that we're going to have to continue to fight in California. And it's ongoing. I defy the people who are telling us that we are hurting animals. Often, you hear those words, often, things like that, to come up with the facts. Because I do the stats, the absolute raw statistics. 99.9% of the animals that are in the arena during competition have nothing ever happen to them. So, yeah, less than 1/10 of 1% of the animals suffer any kind of an injury, from a scratch to the worst. So it's just facts. And I would say that the biggest thing we need to do, and we have started doing this, don't argue with people that you have no chance of changing their minds. You have to speak to the people who you actually have a chance of bringing to your side.
Scott, thank you. You'll have a chance to ask questions of our guests after we hear from Patrick. Patrick, RFD TV and the Cowboy Channel are giving profile, giving voice, and personal stories, which paint the picture of the West. And could you talk a little bit about how that is bridging the divide between urban and rural America? Give us a sort of a foresight of where you see things going on these issues from your vantage point.
Thank you, Senator Lummis, and thank you, Senator Smith, for your kind words. I really appreciate it. When RFD TV was first launched 23 years ago, our number one goal at that time, and still is today, is to reconnect city with country again. The motivation for launching a network that focused on agricultural news and rural lifestyle, rural health care, rural education, and covering Western sports. Rural America's sport is rodeo. Was started that day, and this event that we're at right now that's having $300 million impact used to be in New York City. This used to be in Madison Square Garden. Urban America has gotten away from its rural roots. At one point, somebody grew up, grandma and grandpa had a farm, or mom and dad had a farm, and there was some connection. But because of the way media does cover rural America, if it's not a drought, a disaster, or something bad going on in rural America, there's rarely a story going on. We're fortunate enough to be partners with the PRCA, and one of the things that we do each summer, and we call it 100 Rodeos in 100 Days. We actually go to 100 rodeos in 100 days. And what you see in each of these communities, it's not just the rodeo is pretty much the same wherever you go. But what you see in these broadcasts are these communities. And they get to talk about the impact that rodeo has on their community. This is usually the biggest fundraiser that each community has each year. They support rural youth, their local areas, It's all volunteers. Senator Lummis's rodeo in Cheyenne has, I think, 2,000 volunteers that come in. And you know, most of these rodeos are 75 years old, 90 years old, celebrating their 100th anniversary. They've been doing this for years. So our part in this equation is education. We're trying to educate urban America. I've talked to a number, we had 174 rodeo committee people at a little gathering we had a couple nights ago before the NFR started. And one after another came up with how well their rodeos are being attended now. But the interest that's coming from outside of their area, outside of even their state. One rodeo it was in Idaho, told me that he greets everybody that comes into their rodeo as they come in and thanks them for coming. And he got into a conversation, and this couple came from Massachusetts this year to watch his rodeo because they saw it on the Cowboy Channel. They went to the rodeo. After the rodeo, they came up to him and said, "We're going to fly here every year." Well, it doesn't have to be that hard, but we do have to connect urban America with rural America again. And thanks to these two senators, we're trying to get the word out there. But rodeo is the key. Rodeos, like I said, 23 years I've been trying to reconnect urban and rural America with our networks, RFD TV, and then most recently Cowboy Channel. Rodeo to me is the answer. Rodeo, especially with someone like Taylor Sheridan's help and the interest in wearing a cowboy hat again, has raised the level of awareness of the Western lifestyle. So we've got to take advantage of this now and reconnect with these folks and get them to understand, get them to go to a rodeo, or at least get them to watch a rodeo on television and see the impact that it has. I mean, if rodeo's wiped out or starts in California or New York or somewhere, it's going to wipe out the heartbeat of rural America, which is the rodeo each year, whether it's a 2-day rodeo, 4-day rodeo, a 10-day rodeo, it doesn't matter. This is worth fighting for. This is worth protecting, and with these two ladies leading the charge, I think we're going to get there, but we need your help.
We've got to get more farm in the Farm Bill, but we have to get more education out there as well. And dealing with the administration we're dealing with now, it's really hard to get the restrictions in there. You get this money if you do these things. But a lot of that, I think, could be really bipartisan of what you're mentioning. And I will certainly take that back to the Ag Committee because, it's just pretty difficult right now not having the majority of the Senate. And I want to also mention that Senator Steve Daines is here. He is one of our biggest champions. You talk about reinforcement and backup. There's not a reverse in that man right there when it comes to agriculture, rural way of life, Montana's way of life. So I just want to note that, yeah, we're two up here fighting the game, but there's 3 of us in here that I assure you we are on the same page, and I'm very grateful to him.
Yeah, Senator Daines, would you stand up so we can acknowledge you? Former chair of the Western Caucus in the Senate. Any quick concluding remarks, Tom, Scott, Patrick?
Couple things just to follow up on Senator Hyde-Smith. Education is going to be the key, but education costs money, and that is a great thought. Collectively, we will all have better judgment than any one of us does individually, and those are ideas that I have furthest from my mind. We do a little champions program at the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame. We put on programs for children to educate them about rodeo. We go out into the community. I think we put on 58 programs for school children in Colorado Springs. But there's going to have to be a component of where does the funding come from to get more of that education out there. Patrick is a great resource. He's in hundreds of thousands of homes. And we've got to educate people about our way of life. Switching gears a little bit, we are very, very proud of our safety statistics. That less than 0.1% of our animals are injured in competition, compared to a deer being hit on the highway by a car is about 2%. So just to put in perspective, we're very protectful of our animals. There's nothing that we want better than for our animals to be protected. But we've got to be careful of these fringe groups. And it was no accident. It was no accident that the LA City Band come before their city council on Tuesday. Their agenda came out Friday. They were hoping that they were going to catch us asleep at the wheel when everybody is in Las Vegas for our national convention. All of the rodeo committees were here in Vegas, but we organized. We've got strong leadership, strong lobbyists. I've hired more lobbyists than I ever thought I would in California. And there's good people in California. I know that's not what we always see on the news, but certainly California has a big ag environment. And we have to get those people as well to represent us and showcase our way of life. So thank you all for being here this morning.
Patrick, one more quick comment, and then
Yeah,
I'll turn it over to our fearless leader.
We're being proactive in trying to educate and connect with them. There's only, again, so much we can do, but just get back. For one example, we're doing a Float in the Rose Parade this year. It's devoted to women in Western sports and supporting the Cheyenne Frontier Days. We'll have women's champions on there. We're trying to do a rodeo in New York, but we're trying to do a rodeo in New York, which will be an all-women's rodeo. Barrel racers, breakaway ropers, women bronc riders, women pickup people. It'll be in another year, but again, let's be proactive and try to find ways to connect. I think once you connect with a person in urban America, and they're soaking this up, home cooking and traditional values and safe places they can take their families. That's what rodeo is, and it needs to be protected.
Thank you all again.
When we planned this, I knew it'd be lively, and this is even better than I expected. Thank you all for joining us. On the panel, my son wants to ride bulls, so, I'm like, he's very much into this as well. They mentioned it before, and it's, first, one other thing. I just want to recognize David Duquette in the back of the room there. He helped lead the charge this week to stop the city of Los Angeles from the vote on banning the rodeo, so hats off to you, David. So. And we're going to switch gears here, and you guys, if you want to jump off, you're welcome to. Switch gears here real quick before we wrap. ESA 50th anniversary is coming up, and thought we just want to highlight that real quick at the end of the month. And this year, as we were looking forward to that, we figured out let's evaluate that. Let's take a look at the ESA. So we're coming out with a report, and next Wednesday we're going to release it. It's kind of an analysis, like how successful has the ESA been. And so when you look at success, you look at recovery. And just in short, what the Fish and Wildlife Service is saying is recovered is only half as much as what it really is. We found that out of the 60-some species that they're claiming is recovered, half of them are basically based on data error. So what they had is a recovered species is twice as much as what's really out there. So we have some great stories about that. We have some great, anecdotes. So, and this is just going to be the first launch on Wednesday of something that we're going to be talking about for like the next 6 months from the Western Caucasus Foundation. So, And with that, I'd like to bring up our Chairman Emeritus, Senator Steve Daines, as well as Ryan Bronson for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Ryan Bronson, Director of Government Affairs for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. They're a great friend, and they work with the Western Caucus a lot. From your perspective and from the sportsman's perspective, what kind of are the impacts and stuff that you kind of see on the Endangered Species Act the way it exists now?
Well, first of all, I think as a community, we support the Endangered Species Act because hunters and sportsmen, while we have our favorite species that we pursue and hunt, we just like wildlife, and we like all of wildlife. And so for the Elk Foundation, our organizational mission is to ensure the future of elk, other wildlife, their habitat, and our hunting heritage. So for endangered species, we want to recover them. The problem is the regulatory structure that has emerged, that has come to be, is one that once an animal gets on the endangered species list, it's almost impossible to get them off. And even when we have success with taking animals and getting the Fish and Wildlife Service to delist them, they get pulled back on by courts and by other actions. And so for us, the Endangered Species Act's biggest flaw is that activists consider success getting an animal on the list. We consider success getting an animal off the list. And we have a lot of animals that are trapped and that just seem to be a revolving door, and they can't get delisted even though they are recovered.
So, kind of an analogy to the ESA is like the Roach Motel. You can get in, but you can never get out, kind of thing. So, with that, Senator, looking at the 50 years, the ESA is supposed to be saving species, but what do you see as the challenges to success for the ESA?
Yeah, well, I get to follow Ryan here. Ryan, thank you for what you do with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I'll tell you, you work with a lot of different groups on Capitol Hill. RMEF is truly, they're very, very effective. And they bring people together, which is, I'm just grateful for that. They've been instrumental for us in a lot of our forest management reform efforts. So thank you, as an avid elk hunter myself. Look, I shared an interesting stat that happened this week in Washington. Kamala Harris, your least favorite vice president, came down on the floor of the United States Senate and broke a tie. Now, when the Senate is tied, remember your American government classes from high school, the Vice President of the United States is the President of the Senate, and he or she comes down and breaks the tie. She just set the all-time record for most ties broken by a Vice President in our American history. There have been 47 Vice Presidents since this country was founded. She's now alone with breaking more ties than any other Vice President in less than 3 years in her term. She just surpassed John Adams and John Calhoun, who both served 8 years as vice president. She just did this in less than 3 years. I bring that up because it ties into this discussion about the margins right now between winning and losing are very, very thin. And the problem we have is when Kamala Harris comes down and breaks a tie, she's breaking a tie oftentimes for a horrible new lifetime appointment on the circuit courts or the federal district courts, which is where a lot of the battles that we're fighting in the Endangered Species Act occur. Because the left takes the ESA and uses it as incredible leverage in standing here to stop resource development. We've got 300 million board feet of timber tied up in litigation because of the Endangered Species Act and because of activist liberal judges. So let me talk about the ESA in more detail if I could. We're coming up in 50 years. Somebody said out in Montana, the Endangered Species Act is like an old ranch pickup. It once served a useful purpose, but it's in bad need of repair. I think that sums it up. You look at the outcomes, the results in the Endangered Species Act, just 3% of the total that species have been listed have ever been recovered, or I should say delisted. So the left doesn't want to actually list the species for the sake of recovering. They want to list it for the sake of having it on that list as leverage to use to stop a lot of the Western way of life we have, which is balance and being good stewards of the land. On grizzly bears in Montana, I speak to you as somebody who loves to hunt predators. Over the Thanksgiving break, I had a rifle over my shoulder there, actually going after wolves, and then bear season was still open, black bears. But I'll just tell you, when I was out there, the guy I was hunting with is my hunting buddy. He killed a grizzly bear in self-defense about a year ago from 10 feet away in a snowstorm there in southwest Montana. He heard some rustling in his chicken coop. He went out there, thought it was a coyote. And he always is one that's prepared because he lived right in the middle of grizzly bear country. He brought a semi-automatic 308 there, had thermal on it. And he came face-to-face with grizzly bear. And to tell you, if you kill a grizzly bear, it's like a federal homicide investigation. And he was cleared. He was self-defense. But this is who I spend a lot of time chasing predators with. So we were out just on Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. We're out looking for wolves. And we came across a grizzly sow and 2 cubs, prints, that were just minutes old because we had some fresh snow. You could tell they were absolutely fresh. So that's when your head's on a swivel when you're out there, because right at that same time we saw wolf tracks. Because the wolves will and the bears stay pretty close together that last month before hibernation, because those wolves are making a kill every day, killing those nice elk that Ryan's trying to protect. And the bears are acting as parasites on the wolf kills, because they got to feed the cubs. The wolf getting ready for hibernation. It's a fascinating kind of little mini ecosystem there. We have a lot of grizzly bears. So here are the facts. Over the last 20 years, the bears have recovered in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. For 20 years, they've exceeded the target set. And there's separate criteria. Total number of bears, you've got to have number of sows. You take a look at cubs and so forth. 20 years. So in 2003, they got above the target. The question is, why isn't the grizzly bear delisted? Why haven't we returned management of the grizzly bear back to the states of Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming? It's because of judicial activism in some of these NGOs out there that file lawsuits. And so it's no longer criteria-based or science-based. It is ideologically based. And we have another great threat that's coming at us now. You saw a judge in Montana last week now listed the wolverines as threatened. Now that kind of comes by, if you're sitting there reading your news or seeing a tweet or something saying, well, wolverines are threatened. What difference does that make? The left will use now wolverines as their new grizzly bear. And you say, on what basis are wolverines threatened? This is where it gets even more crazy. They looked at climate change projections out to the year 2100. Now, I'm not making this up. Out to 2100, and they said based on their climate change modeling and less snowpack, the wolverines will not have enough snow to properly den, and it's going to be threatening their existence. Reminds me of Greta Thunberg here. I think, remember back in 2018, she says we got 5 years left and the planet's going to be over. How in the world do they count on their models on to 2100? But you have judges who are taking these climate models and basis here, instead of delisting the grizzly bear, who is clearly over the quantifiable targets. Now they've added wolverines. So this is the battle we face at the moment, and why judicial activism is a key part of what has to be fixed regarding the ESA. We need to fix the statute of the ESA. We need to have less subject to judicial review, so once you release it, they're back on the they're off the list. But we've got a long ways to go, and we also have to be working hard to make sure we get better judges on the bench, because if you live in the Ninth Circus Court like we do in Montana, it's a real battle.
And with the grizzly bear in Washington now, the federal government's looking to reintroduce the grizzly bear in the Cascades, where it hasn't been in a long time. And that we'll get into, serious population areas. ESA, how does it impact access, for the sportsmen, for the hunters on private and public lands?
Well, I think the biggest impact that the Endangered Species Act has had is that in large swaths of the West and other places, but particularly in the West, we are not managing our national forests. And we're not thinning the trees, we're not doing the lumber extraction that creates the kinds of open forests that benefit elk and deer and other game species. And so what we've seen is that game species are spending more and more time on private land. And they're doing that in large part because of federal regulations prohibiting the benefits of habitat management on federal lands. National forests used to be where most of the elk spent most of their time. and we've crossed the line where most elk are spending more of their time on private property because the habitat's better. Well, when that happens, they're not available to folks that don't have access to that public land. So it's absolutely reducing the ability for hunters to be able to find quality levels of game populations in the places that they have access to. Those two things are directly tied to each other. And so from an access perspective, the Endangered Species Act is creating regulatory conditions that are making it harder for hunters to be able to fill their freezers with elk or deer, and that's not in anyone's best interest.
You mentioned forest management, Senator. You're working on a bill to fix the Cottonwoods decision by the Ninth Circuit Court, as you call it.
Yeah. So this has been a long battle, and that gets back to I'm an engineer by degree, not a lawyer. So I'm way out of my league here talking about Supreme Court rulings and Circuit Court rulings. But basically, what happened is the Ninth Circuit Court and the 10th Circuit Court had a disagreement in rulings, and so the only way you settle that is take it up to the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court said, Congress, you've got to fix this problem. It's going to be an Article 1 issue, not an Article 3 issue. So we call this the Ninth Circuit Cottonwood fix because it's correcting a bad ruling by the Ninth Circuit Court. Here's the good news. After battling this now for many, many years, and I tell you, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation have been right there with us throughout this fight because they bring a voice of reason and credibility to both sides of the aisle, which I really, really appreciate because as fired up as I get about some of the partisan politics going on back in Washington, look, if you want to get an outcome, if you want to get a result, you've got to have a bipartisan solution, or else you're just going to be issuing press releases and talking to yourself and to your own little echo chamber. After battling this for many years, working with Joe Manchin as the chairman of the Energy and Natural Resource Committee now, we've actually moved from not even being able to get a hearing to then finally getting a hearing, and then getting what we call a markup, is where you actually have a chance to vote up or down on a bill, to actually getting it passed, and then getting it passed by unanimous consent the last time. So this has been like summiting Everest, just kind of go to Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3. Well, we've summited now, getting it through with strong bipartisan support. This will fix the issue. This is the issue that's affecting right now timber harvest in Montana. That's the 300 million board fee I was talking about, is the Ninth Circuit Cottonwood problem. So now we got to figure out a vehicle to get it passed and get it onto on the Senate floor and get it onto Joe Biden's desk, and that's where we're at. So there's a remedy is there. We're getting close. If we do this, it'll be the single biggest improvement in forest management probably in the last 30, 40 years.
Looking at 50 years of the ESA, and Ryan, if your organization had one or two thoughts to fix the ESA, not to fix or to improve the ESA, to better save species, what would you all recommend?
Well, I think requiring activist groups to actually come to the table at the beginning to help collaborate on solutions would be the first thing, and not giving them their only option is to go to court and hold everything up. That's one. And then related to that, the Equal Access to Justice Act, which was passed by Congress to give the little guy an opportunity to fight the federal government in court, has been co-opted. That big, well-funded activist nonprofits are allowed to collect millions and millions of dollars in attorney's fees every time they sue and win against the federal government. They're using the Equal Access to Justice Act to bankroll their activist litigation strategies in the courts to continually keep coming back to sue again and again. I think reforming the Equal Access to Justice Act so that endangered species suits can't be brought back again and again by three-letter word activist organizations would be a good start to helping us make the Endangered Species Act work the way it's supposed to. That's not the only solution, but I think that's one of the big ways that we could help improve the litigation aspect of the Endangered Species Act to make it more collaborative, to actually recover species rather than just litigate them forever.
Senator, aside from the Cottonwood fix, what are your two top priorities to help save species by fixing the ESA?
Yeah, well, First of all, we need to have about 25 more Cynthia Lummises back in Washington. That'd be the first thing I ought to do here. So I wish we could clone Cynthia and move her to Montana. We could have her running against John Tester up there, Cynthia, if you like. We've got a great candidate there, by the way, in Tim Sheehy. But Cynthia, anytime you want to get cloned, let me know. We'll have a spot for you there on the battlefield. But there's nothing better than having a ranch lady like Cynthia Lummis there who understands the West. This is not an issue of the head; it's an issue of her heart. It runs through her veins, and as it does through mine. And I just really appreciate your leadership too in the Western Caucus, Cynthia, what you're doing very much so great. Such a great partner. It's like Cynthia and I don't have to preheat the oven before we think about an issue. We're usually just on the same page when we meet, and it's just a joy to serve with somebody where you're so aligned with somebody like Senator Lummis. Look, the main thing, and Ryan just talked about it, it's on the litigation side, is that once the species has recovered, get it delisted, put some kind of shot clock on there, put a time frame on. I mean, 20 years. Now the grizzly bears have exceeded in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem the quantifiable targets set by the Endangered Species Act by the Fish and Wildlife Services. So you got to put a time frame on it. Number two, you got to protect it from endless litigation. And so we've got to have the subject to judicial review components of this so that these can't go back to court and ties back. That's exactly what's happened when the bear's been delisted before. It goes right back into court. So that's one part of it. And the other part is a longer play, and that is we just got to continue working the judiciary, which the Founding Fathers gave the U.S. Senate a unique responsibility, the advise and consent role for the executive branch before you put judges on a bench. We get a vote up or down on judges. We got to get better judges.
Cool. Well, saving species in the ESA, rodeos, water, core Western Caucus issues we can talk about all day. Unfortunately, we don't have all day. There's a rodeo people want to get to. But I want to thank everybody for joining us here. Thank Chairman Emeritus Staines, our Senate Chair, Senator Cynthia Lummis. It's a great group of people. We work with all of you and all the staff. Thank you for joining us this weekend. We will see you at the rodeo.